topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello and welcome. I'm Bill Martinez, and this is the Bill Martinez Show, and we are live. Good to have you with us. If you have followed our radio show over the years, a recurring voice and reporter comes on the show. Actually, he's a researcher. I shouldn't, lower his significance because he is of heightened significance, to say the least. I'm talking about Chris Farrell, the Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. Judicial Watch has had a rich history from its very beginning and has been committed to holding our government accountable and to be the watchdog of corruption. You may think, well, what happened to the mainstream media? Isn't that their job? Well, yeah, it should be, but certainly it is not. And more Judicial Watch has stepped up on our behalf, on behalf of the American people, to hold our government accountable and to point out corruption as they see it. They are the referees and the umpires, so to speak, and they fill a needed void in the whole governmental process. And Chris Farrell, the Director of Investigations and Research with Judicial Watch, is with us, and he joins us now. Chris, welcome to the show.
Bill, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I'm looking forward to this because I thought it would be appropriate for our audience, radio as well as television, to review the hits of Judicial Watch and all the great things that you've done in this past year, from Ashli Babbit, the Biden document secrets, suing the FBI, Hunter Biden, the gun update, and the list goes on and on. These are things that Judicial Watch has been monitoring. But I thought before we'd start is you remind our audience about the rich history of Judicial Watch and why you're here.
So first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction. Judicial Watch has been around for about 27 years, and I've been with them for 25 of those last years.
Wow.
Serving as a Director of Investigations and Research and also as a board member. And most folks will identify Tom Fitton, our president, because they'll see him on various broadcasts or radio shows, much like I'm doing now with you. And Tom, of course, is our president and our chief spokesperson, and that's what folks identify with. They remember Tom. But the third member of our crew is Paul Orphanides, who is our chief attorney. Mm-hmm. He's a brilliant attorney, has argued in front of the Supreme Court, and he oversees all of our litigation, all of our lawsuits. Judicial Watch is a little different because we just don't talk about public policy issues. We take action. We sue people. We sue the government. And that's kind of the margin of difference. There's a lot of people in D.C. who have conferences and they publish papers, and all that's good. I'm not knocking that. We do the same thing. But we have investigators who go out and investigate. We find people. We recover records from archives. We use the Freedom of Information Act very aggressively. And then, of course, we put that all together with litigation. And so we try to be a watchdog to really educate the public about what the government is or is not doing.
Right.
And to hold them accountable.
You might say a watchdog with teeth, right?
Exactly right. Not just pointing and shouting, but we try to take a chunk out of them when we can as well.
Well, last year, when we've had you on the show, we talked about FOIA requests. You mentioned it right now. This is a great instrument, and Judicial Watch has used this extensively. Right. How many FOIA requests did you put out last year?
So I can't give you a number for last year, but I can tell you that overall in our database right now, under active management, there are more than 7,000.
Wow.
And of that 7,000 this year in litigation, we have somewhere between 240 and 280 cases that we're suing over. So that's to give you an idea of scope on that, just to understand what that means. At Syracuse University, there's something called the Transactional Research Accountability Center or something. What they do is that group at Syracuse, they look at all the people that are using the open records laws, and they compile stats. And Judicial Watch is the largest Freedom of Information Act requester and the largest litigator in the country. And then the next three organizations behind us combined don't equal our workload.
Wow.
So we are dominant in the field. No one does more open records law requests or lawsuits than Judicial Watch does.
Chris, I think our audience may be surprised. They've heard of FOIA requests, from time to time, but they think, well, gosh, our government, we the people, it's our government. Why is our government so reticent in making these records available? Because they should be part of the public record, should they not?
Yeah. The problem is that what they end up being is evidence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the rule of thumb, or what I would teach, I taught a journalism law class at George Mason University for 5 years. And one of the things I tried to explain to the students there is that generally speaking, people lie and records don't. Right?
Yeah, right.
So you'll get Karine Jean-Pierre, standing there in the White House briefing room saying Lord knows what. And if you rely on that, you're in trouble. But
exactly.
When I can give you 500 pages of bank statements and emails and those sorts of things, that's a much more reliable, much more compelling bit of evidence than something some spokesperson is out there flapping around in the breeze.
Yeah, no question. I guess in legal parlance, and better, Chris, that the written document is always stronger than anything that's anecdotal, right?
Right, exactly. And the beauty of the work that we're doing is you can even be philosophically opposite us. You could be some lefty socialist, woke agenda person. And if I can present you with a record or a document and say, here, read this for yourself. Now you tell me what it means, right?
Right.
It has a tendency to blow up a lot of the rhetorically charged arguments of people about who's done what to who. All right, forget all the hyperbolic language and the opinion stuff. Here's the record. This is the documentation. You read it. Now explain.
Right, exactly.
So when we have an email from Joe Biden produced to us from the National Archives, where he's using a pseudonym, and they come out of the vice president's records at the archives, and it shows him lining up a phone call with Poroshenko, and his son Hunter is CC'd in the email. You tell me about what Joe Biden does or doesn't know about his son and Ukraine and Poroshenko and Burisma. I mean, it becomes impossible to get away from.
Of course, I guess as a general rule, as humanoids, it's tough to deal with accountability. And it seems at a governmental level, at the bureaucracy level especially, there's so much interference, and there's been such a history of escapism and lack of accountability that they know the deal. I mean, it reminds me, Chris, when I was talking with Dinesh D'Souza, and he said that one of his big takeaways after his stint in jail, I think for 7-8 months for election interference or something that he was involved with. Right. So he says, Bill, the big takeaway for me was that the cons never give up the con. And I said, well, you might as well just say the politicians never give up the con. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it is their stock and trade. It's their business. They've honed their trade craft to a very fine, sharp edge. And if they abandon it, well, then what are they going to do? I mean, this is leveraging their government position for either some kind of power or to line their pockets with cash is what they do for a living. And you can't take that away, because then they'd have to go out and, actually earn a living.
Get a real job, huh?
That's exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is that, you don't expect, I mean, this is what cracks me up sometimes in watching these hearings in Congress is like they ask these questions, like as if the person's going to roll over and go, yeah, you got me. I mean,
I had Congressman Comer on my podcast a few weeks back, and he was all excited because he had that check where Biden's brother was supposedly repaying a loan,
the $40,000 loan.
Yeah, and I said to him, "Look, do me a favor, will you? I'm old enough to remember the Watergate hearings, and Sam Ervin would sit up there and make an opening remark, and then he'd shut up. And they had investigative counsel. They had attorneys on the staff would do all the questioning. And the congressman just sat there like jurors and listened to it. And so the investigative counsel could work through a logical line of questioning and develop, the testimony from the witness to get to a point. And at the very, very end, if the congressman had a question here or there, then they would chime in. Now they don't run it that way. Now all the hearings, they're all grandstanding, right? Yeah. They all want their little 5 to 8 second audio clip or video clip where they sound like they're a genius, or they get one over on the witness, and they use it for fundraising, frankly. I mean, that's
exactly. And the thing is that staff has written the questions for them, because you know it didn't come from them, because as they're reading off the sheet, you know the difference. If somebody is familiar with the topic, it just flows. If they're not, it gets halting, and so it becomes real obvious.
You're right, but the problem is when they do this, 5 minutes from one member, 5 minutes from the other, back and forth, you never get anywhere.
That's
and
right.
The witness can sit there and rope-a-dope and play stupid games. You will remember, I think, quite painfully, that Trey Gowdy interviewed Hillary Clinton for 11 hours and didn't lay a glove on her. And in the process, she looked like a martyr. She was the great victim. I subjected myself to 11 hours from Trey Gowdy and blah, blah, blah. I mean, she still went down the tubes. This was over Benghazi, you may recall.
Right. Yeah.
But that's part of the problem, is that these guys sit there and they go back and forth and they never get anything accomplished. So I made Comer, I said to him, will you promise me that you'll use an investigative counsel? Oh, no, I can't do that. I said, well, good luck. You're going to go round and round in circles like every other committee does. Right. You really need to change the process that you're using. Go back to a Watergate style, not prosecution, but hearings.
Hearings, yeah, right.
They would go a lot further.
Well, you look at the Democrats, when they get their 5 minutes, for the most part, they're pretty much on point. Occasionally you'll get the pontificators and that, but they're still committed to a line of questioning, or just, buttressing up the individual, to kind of give them some relief of pain.
Yeah, they also synchronize their questions with each other. Republicans are too stupid to do that.
They're kind of all over the place. And it's my 5 minutes, and I'm going to take every bit of it, going, well, but what does it accomplish on behalf of the American people? And the time invested here, because at the end of the day, like you said, the American people are watching this and they go, okay, what was all that about?
And that's why they get discouraged by that, right? It's very disheartening and very frustrating. That's what turns people off. If they actually synchronized their work and did something effective, the American public would understand, and they would proactively engage on this. Mm-hmm. Instead, they just look at them and say, they're a bunch of clowns. And
it makes you wonder.
It's really corrosive. In the long term, it's very bad.
Well, and it seems like it's a cabal, because it's like, okay, like everybody's involved in this game except the American people, who have to suffer through it. We're talking with Chris Farrell, the Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. We're reviewing 2023, a good year it was for the American people in terms of exposing and bringing light to government corruption. Chris, what we've been able to see in this past year especially is that the corruption is there. It runs deep, and it is going to take some serious leadership if they are really targeted on cleaning this mess up. And it could take us a number of years. I don't think it could be done with one administration. I mean, this has to be all hands on deck, where even the American voter decides, regardless of all the cheating or suspected cheating or anything that would go on in election process, to say, okay, we're going to elect officials with a backbone and with nerve that are not concerned about getting reelected, but are most concerned about the Constitution and getting our country back on track. Is that fair?
I agree with you 100%. And, sadly, there's a lot of sort of professional politicians where job one is getting elected, job two is getting reelected, and then there's other stuff that they worry about. And that's there's a real disservice there. I think one of the most important things, and this is one of the topics that kind of recurs, in giving you sort of a list of things that were big this year, it actually is featured probably 3 or 4 times. But we've had major victories in cleaning up voting rolls around the country. And so whether it's California, Los Angeles County alone, we removed 1.5 million fake voter registrations. In District of Columbia, just in the last week, this one cracks me up. We forced the removal of 15% of the voting rolls for the Washington, D.C. The District of Columbia we forced them to remove 103,000 fake voter. When I say fake voter registrations, what I mean is the person doesn't live there, they moved away,
right?
They're a felon and they're not eligible to vote. The information is inaccurate. What folks don't understand is that the electoral official wherever you live, and that really goes county by county. But some counties have a board of elections, some have an election supervisor. However you're organized in whatever state you're in, the senior election official has 2 obligations under the law. It's the Voting Rights Act of 1986. Section 7 says, go out and register everybody that's eligible. And that's a good thing. If you're eligible, great. Register. Exactly. But Section 8 says that the election official has an affirmative obligation to make sure that the voting rolls are accurate, which means they have to go in and check them.
Right.
So if somebody moved, if somebody died, if somebody's a felon, there's all sorts of reasons why you have to go through and make sure that what you have is accurate. Well, many places blow that off entirely, and they don't have an aggressive double check plan on their voting rolls. So we've gone around the country and we've done an analysis between the census data and then the voting rolls, and we line them up. And there's places where they have, 150% registration. Well, how does that? I mean,
that's not even close.
That is ripe for people getting in and doing mischief, right? Creating problems.
Yeah.
And so we warn these officials. And we say, look, if you don't clean it up, we're going to sue you. Sometimes they act on it right away. Sometimes they wait for us to sue them, and then they go whoopsie, and they go in and fix it. In North Carolina, we had to remove 500,000 people where the voting rolls weren't accurate. They were just wrong. And so that's our effort to make sure, because we believe that if you have the voting rolls clean, if they're accurate, then you're less likely to have mischief and gamesmanship and other irregularities is probably a good word. I don't want to use the F word, fraud, because that has a very specific legal meaning, and the left will jump up and down and scream when you say fraud. So I just want to call it's an irregularity, but we've had multiple victories in states across the country to clean up voter rolls.
Well, and we appreciate that. And I think you and I talked about this the last time on the radio, Chris, is that being in marketing most of my life and doing a lot with direct marketing, I used to do that early on in my advertising career, is that we discovered 25% of a zip code will move every year. Right. So if the registrar of voters is not on top of this on an annual basis, you've got 25% attrition already baked into the cake. And that's how this stuff keeps mounting up. Right. And I think that, it's appropriate for Judicial Watch. It's appropriate, I believe, for for the rest of America that is demanding a free and fair voting process, an electoral process that we sue. We sue these days. I mean, look what Mark Elias did, during COVID, as he and his 500 Democratic operative lawyers, his legal beagles, they went in there and scared the holy what have you out of these various states, and caused them to even break their own state laws. I mean, it's amazing how their level of intimidation, what they were able to accomplish in a month's time. And here we are. We've been having this discussion about voter rolls, ever since 2020 came to light. It's kind of been an ongoing deal, but 2020 definitely brought it more to light, where people are saying, "All right, enough with this already. Let's get this thing fixed."
Yeah, and the wild inconsistencies from state to state. So in California, I had Gavin Newsom sending out mail-in ballots, not ballots that were requested by people.
Right.
Just him on his own volition, sending out mail-in ballots to basically every street address in California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want to talk about an opportunity for fraud?
Well,
you could go into an apartment building and scoop up 50 mail-in ballots and fill them all out and send them in.
Exactly.
Zero accountability. No idea who sent them in. How do you know that what the person is matched up with the ballot that's received? It was all make-believe. They could just do whatever they wanted.
Right. And the thing is, Chris, see, Republicans have written off California. It's been corrupt for so long. And you've had all these, I think at one point, what was it, over 3 million? Or was that just in LA? But I thought it was California as well. They had 3 million names on the voter roll. I think you were able to negotiate and get 50% off, but there's still, another 1.5 million names that should be cleared off. And Democrats, in typical fashion, holding to the con, are going to resist every step of the way. And
Yes.
And it's up to the citizens of California. I mean, they themselves have to say, we need to clean up the state. And what you've been getting away with in terms of these, ballot harvesting, they were the pioneers of that. And did it before it was legal. So,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
in addition to that, Chris, a lot of people don't know is Gavin Newsom authorized the release of a driver's license to illegal immigrants. Well, when they send out ballots, they send out ballots based on your driver's license.
Right.
So you have people who are illegals receiving ballots. And I know this for a fact is the Democrats will go because they know where the ballots were sent, and they go knocking on the doors and they say, "Hey, we're here to get your ballot." And they'll talk to an illegal, and the illegal will say, "But I'm not a citizen. I'm not allowed to vote." Well, they sent you a ballot, didn't they? Don't worry, we'll take care of it. Just give me the ballot.
That is exactly correct. And, that kind of nonsense, or there's this phony, disingenuous claim. I experienced this in Arizona in 2018. The voting registrar says, we lined up our voting rolls. We bounced it off the DMV and they didn't say anything. Well, I mean, the DMV was giving out licenses to everybody who could, walk and talk. I mean, it's no check whatsoever. In fact, it's a counter check. It's actually providing false information to bounce it. But that was offered as some sort of an explanation that says, well, the rolls, we bounced it off DMV, so we know. You don't know anything bouncing it off DMV. This goes back to Al Gore in the dark ages with Motor Voter when he was still a senator from Tennessee. Somehow people forget all this stuff, but I mean,
well, you see, this is the thing. You see, our government's so massive, Chris, and we've gotten away and we've added complexity to it when we haven't even got the essentials underway. I mean, I've always been one to vote for, have a national 1 day of voting. Everybody gets a day off.
Also,
I'm sorry?
The Constitution says it's an election day.
Yes.
Not election week, election season,
or
election
a month.
Day, period. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's another part of the problem is you've got crazy judges saying, well, we have to allow for the mails and, it might be bad weather and all crazy excuses for stretching it out. And basically it's, look, what number do I have to get to win? And now I'm going to keep counting until I get there. I mean, that's the corruption of it.
Well, let me use their logic, Chris, because so often when you go in, you say, "Hey, I got a problem with the count here," and they said, "Well, we ran the broad numbers, and even if you're right, it's not going to make any difference, right?"
Yeah, that's the worst.
That's the argument that they use, right? Okay,
well, that's part of the lie. Yeah.
Okay, so then in the case of their argument about the mail being slow or whatever other excuse they want to use, what is that number? Would that number affect the final toll for the sake of having a free and fair election?
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. The answer, my friend, is what was done in Florida, where they figured out how to have an election on one day.
Right.
And the answer is also in Virginia, a little different approach, but essentially, by midnight, by 2 a.m., they close the polls at 7 or 8, whatever the local time is.
Right.
And you give them 4 or 5 hours to get everything bundled together and counted. And, late at night or early the next morning, bang, you've got an answer. No one's guessing. Yeah. No one's saying, well, we expect it's going to be contested and we'll be in court for the next 3 days and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
None of that garbage. You get a real answer by late that night or very early the next morning. And that's what we have to have. We have to have that. We can't go on with this crazy election season that we're doing.
Exactly. So you mean to tell me that we shouldn't be having election counting interrupted for 3 hours, in swing states? I mean, it wasn't just in one state. It was like in 5 states. This was an orchestration, but there's nothing here to see. Move on, Obi-Wan Kenobi. We got this covered, and nobody is supposed to have their suspicions or become a conspiratist.
And that is the problem. And we've seen, I guess, in Detroit, they were putting up plywood over the glass so people couldn't see what was going on in the room. People were threatened. In fact, if you go way back, I guess it was, I forget which exact year it was. Maybe it was 2008. You remember in Philadelphia, they had the Black Panthers.
The Black Panthers during Obama's
right.
election. It's like, no election interference here.
Yeah, you had a greeting committee of guys in paramilitary garb holding batons, and they were welcoming you to the polling station. Right. The irony of that, this is an interesting story. The guy who heads up our election program at Judicial Watch is a very fine attorney by the name of Bob Popper. And Bob Popper was the deputy chief of the voting rights section in the Justice Department. And that Philadelphia Black Panther case was his.
Wow.
And he had taken it all the way down the field, 99 yards. He was on the 1-inch line about to get a judgment against that group of Black Panthers where they were going to essentially admit, what we did was wrong, and, forever swearing that they would never do that again. And the Obama administration made him drop the case.
Yeah, Eric Holder. Yeah, exactly.
And when that happened, Bob said, thank you, goodbye. And he left the Department of Justice and he came over to Judicial Watch.
Yeah, how corrupt. How corrupt is that? And I don't care if I got an admission from them. We saw them. We saw what they were doing. It was clear intimidation. I mean, and they were holding these batons in their hand and slapping it into their hands, which could be quite intimidating, I think, for some of the older folks, right?
That's an unusual greeting.
Right. Exactly. And then also the thing that was that added to the suspicion, I think it was in Pennsylvania. There were something like 58 voting districts, Chris. I don't know if you remember this or not, but all 58, 100% voted for Obama.
Yes. Yeah.
100%. That is mathematically impossible.
That's like the Wisconsin nursing homes for the dementia and Alzheimer's patients, and all of them 100% voted for Biden.
Yes.
Maybe because they identified with him. I'm not sure, but
he's one of us. Yeah.
To come up with voting statistics where and I feel sorry for these people. Obviously, I mean, I'm not making fun of them, not by a long shot.
Well,
I'm very sympathetic to them and their families.
It's elder abuse in the least, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the idea that somehow the folks in these nursing homes or these assisted living facilities, that somehow 100%, and every single one of them, and uniformly, I mean, it wasn't like this happened in 3 places. This was entire blocks of people in these medical facilities. All of them, every single one voted for Biden. It's preposterous.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk to the family members, Chris, and they say, my mom's only lucid we're lucky if she's a minute a day of lucidity. Right. How, and so this was kind of a typical response in terms of the clarity of these poor folks in these assisted living facilities, and how they were taken advantage of. I mean, we could be talking about this till next year easily, Chris. But it's at some point, there's got to be a line drawn here to say we're not going to have this anymore. And if there needs to be a class action suit against all these state houses, all these elector officials, to hold them into account, then we have to do something with some rapidity, because the 2024 election is just around the corner. And if you think in some sort of measure of your understanding that the Democrats are not going to cheat again, it makes me sad to think that you're talking about a party, you're talking about fellow citizens in our country who flat out are cheating and giving us the government that we have now. As Barack Obama said, elections have consequences. Well, look at the consequences that we have, because Joe Biden somehow got 82 million votes. Donald Trump gets 10 million more than he had the previous year. Again, the math doesn't add up. There were so many anomalies in this election, and for the courts to ignore this or not want to entertain it gives you suspicion about the whole entirety of the government, Chris. That is everybody in the government this corrupt, would allow this kind of stuff to occur?
The short answer is yes. I mean, I hate to say that, but it's true. For an awful lot of people, this isn't about a free and fair election. What it's really about is power.
Power and control. Yeah.
And I mean, and that, my friend, as you well know, that is pure Bolshevik communism. This is anything. I mean, that literally anything to accumulate, acquire, consolidate power. And they really don't give a damn. They will run over their mother in a truck to get what they want. And they feel incredibly, justified, very righteous about what they're doing, because they know, this is in their thinking, their mind, they know best. And, it really is about power. And that's this is part of the great struggle that we're in. This is the cultural Marxism that we're wrestling with. This is the kind of thing, with the oppressed and the oppressor. You see this kind of language in the reaction on college campuses.
Exactly. I was going to say.
To the brutality of October 7th, where these Hamas terrorist animals, brutalize Israelis in ways that are beyond your imagination. And that gets translated into this Marxist dialectic on college campuses of oppressed and oppressor. And, that has become so ingrained. It has nothing to do with our founding documents. It has nothing to do with the democratic republic. It has nothing to do with our constitutional system. That is pure Marxist ideology at work. And it is accepted and adopted as being the standard now. And, when you look at statistics and reporting on people that think that socialism is great, or it just wasn't done right. We can do it better. We can tweak it. Right. They somehow forget that both fascism and communism are opposite sides of the same coin. And that coin is socialism. And I mean, all that brings is oppression.
Right.
And but that is the driving philosophy in the country right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, after hundreds and hundreds of years of this grand experiment of theirs, they always say we need more money and more time. But after all this, you would think if there was any merit to it, Chris, you'd be able to have a highlight and be able to say, well, at least we got it right here in no name country of the world or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, it really, but nowhere. I mean, because even in our country, we delved, you know, the Pilgrims delved with that idea and they figured it out within a year.
Right.
Right.
If you don't work, you don't eat. It's that simple. Yeah.
It's fundamental. So we throw out the fundamentals, but, you know, getting back to what you were talking about is that, you see, America's heart and soul has been so compromised and corrupted. And as a people overall, I know that's a broad brush statement, but look at it. Look at these kids and look at these presidents of these universities who can't even answer a direct question because they cannot seem to have and I mean, these are smart people. These are, you know, supposedly smart people, but right. I think they've become so open-minded, their brains have fallen out to where they can't even discern, Chris, good from evil. Here you have, like you said, the atrocities that took place on October the 7th. You had Jewish women raped and drugged naked in the streets of Gaza. And I said the other day, I said, did you notice how many Palestinians jumped out in the street and stopped Hamas from dragging these women, these defenseless women in the street? Not one. They were all cheering. So that says a lot about the Palestinians. I'll tell you what, you know what? I don't want them living next to me. I don't want them next to my kids. I'm sorry. You know, there needs to be some reform there, and they need to understand that their souls are rot to the core when they approve of this kind of horrific terror that took place. And in these people that want to talk about a two-state solution, I've never believed in it. You can't coincide with you know, somebody who wants to kill you. I don't know how you coexist with somebody like that.
Well, what's remarkable is that the dirty little secret is that General, now President al-Sisi in Egypt, he's not going to open the southern gates of Gaza.
Of course not.
And welcome his co-religionists into Egypt. Nor is the king of Jordan going to do the same thing. Now ask yourself why. Why is that? Because, I mean, ethnically, religiously, culturally, you would think that they would embrace their brothers and support them. Why doesn't that happen? Right?
Yeah, because they know they're compromised. They know they're bringing a bad element into the recipe that they can't control. These are rambunctious, out of control terrorists that are taking their orders from Iran, or they're taking it from some reading of the Quran that they want to interpret.
Right, the Muslim Brotherhood element, and Iran. And so again, the other little secret that no one really wants to talk about out loud is that the leaders of all of the countries that are at least trying to be part of the civilized world, like people who are signatories to the Abraham Accords, or civilized neighbors of Israel, countries like Jordan and Egypt, they're quietly cheering on the Israelis.
Right.
They want them to wipe out Hamas half a step less than the Israelis, because they view them as a threat. They know they're dealing with savage lunatics. And you won't get them on CNN making an announcement about it.
Of course not.
But behind the scenes, the leaders of those countries, they know exactly what they're dealing with, and they're not interested in importing that into their country at all.
Yeah, exactly. But here we are. In March of this year, speaking of universities, you reported on this early on. Now people are catching up. Open the Books did an extensive study to reveal how much foreign money was coming into the universities. And you revealed back in March of this year how much money was going to Texas A&M from Qatar. Yeah.
What had happened was we had heard that a lot of money was flowing into Texas A&M from Qatar. And we said, well, okay, I think the number ended up being like $500 million. It was a huge amount of money.
Right.
And Texas A&M is a public university. So under the Texas Open Records laws, we said, well, you're a public university and you're accepting money from a foreign country. What are you doing with it? Where does it go? People don't give you $500 million, for laughs. That's a lot more than lunch money, right?
Right.
That's a lot of money. So what's the
you can be a gooder friend of the Bidens with $500 million, by the way.
So where's that money going, and what's the outcome? And Texas A&M said, well, that's a private donation. So, well, you're a public university, Right. And so we went around and around on this, and Texas Attorney General got involved, and we had to sue. But we were on the front end of revealing, and it ended up that the amount came out, the $500 million. But we ended up getting on the front end of a lot of subsequent reporting of foreign donations to U.S. universities. So when you see these 19-year-olds with, they don't have brains, they have yogurt in their heads, and they're marching around screaming, from the river to the sea, and talking about rights and, gay and lesbian supporters of Hamas and all this other insanity.
Gays for Hamas. How loud? I mean, you see that and you think that's got to come from the Babylon Bee. They're not serious. Right?
I know, but unfortunately it's true. And so, but when you see this and you say, well, gee, how did that happen? Now you know why.
Exactly.
So when Qatar shows up and gives them, $500 million, it influences policy. It influences personnel decisions. It influences curriculum. And so,
and these professors that are hired on, and then, and you talked about importing hatred. We've been saying this on the show as well, Chris, is that America has been importing hatred from the Middle East. We got kids coming in here. You have no idea. There's no vetting of them. They don't realize, somebody was exposing the other day, UNRWA, their educational books on how they teach the young kids. I mean, they're teaching, these books are in Jerusalem. Okay. Yep. They are throughout the Middle East, and they're teaching Jewish hatred. And I mean,
to little
kids. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And look, we reap what we sow. And so in this case, we've been extraordinarily stupid. And we've given student visas out to people who very often lie in their visa application. And, one way to get the attention of some of these universities is the ones who have had the most protests, the ones where people have been threatened. There's instances where Jewish students have had to lock themselves in rooms or in libraries. Or they said, I'm out of here. I'm going home. They're not even staying at the university. Where that's happened, you just suspend all federal dollars going to that school for 2 or 3 years and watch what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Turn off the money. Not forever, not just penalize them. Say, look, I need to get your attention. All the X number of $1 billion you're getting, you're not. So straighten up, and then we'll reevaluate you in 2 or 3 years, and we'll see if you've come to your senses or not, and then maybe we'll turn the money back on. That's the only thing they understand. Otherwise, you're going to see the lying that you saw by these 3 phony college presidents in front of Congress.
That's sad. Yeah.
Stefanik in New York did a job on them last week. But when you turn the money off, all of a sudden they snap to and they pay attention.
Exactly. Well, money is what brought them to this point, and you take the money away and you'll get them to the other point, right? Exactly right. Just to your point. Another thing that Judicial Watch covered last year was what happened at the Air Force Academy, their focus on anti-American critical race theory training of cadets.
Yeah, and more cultural Marxism at work. So, I mean, for folks that don't know, way back, just in the post-World War I era, there was a school of thought known as the Frankfurt School, and they specialized in something called critical theory. And in essence, it was an effort to deconstruct all the major building blocks of Western civilization. They were going to take apart everything that you and I believe in. That's their goal.
Right.
That school in Frankfurt, Germany, ended up decamping, moving off to Columbia University in New York, Some of the people split off and created the New School in New York, but they were leaving Germany in 1930s because the fascists, Hitler's people, didn't have any sense of humor about what they were proposing because it was Marxist philosophy. So this Marxist philosophy over time has become incredibly influential in all of our universities. It's contaminated everything in sight. And the way it manifests itself most recently is in this insanity known as critical race theory, where you go around and you say, "Oh, Farrell, you're a white guy, blue-eyed devil, Western European male. Right. You're intrinsically evil. Everything about me is bad because I'm an old white guy and I represent everything that is, archaic and hateful and everything else." It's institutional racism, but in reverse. They're teaching this at the academies. Yeah. The Air Force Academy in particular we looked at, but frankly, it's present at all of military academies.
Exactly.
And that's it's very dangerous.
Yeah. How's that compromising the leadership?
It's horrific is what it's doing. It creates division. I used to be an Army officer a million years ago, and we were all green, right? It was merit-based. If you knew what you were doing, you got promoted. If you were a moron, you didn't get promoted. And so it didn't matter what color you were, where you came from, rich, poor, north, south. It was irrelevant. Did you get the job done? Yes or no? And that's what drove the entire system.
We got a couple minutes left. I want to touch on this, and then I'm going to let you kind of summarize because you guys have done just such outstanding work and in so many areas, and all the information they can research for themselves. Again, you don't have to take our word for it. Like we always say, Chris, is that you must own your own knowledge. Hopefully what we've done is motivated people to do a deeper dive and find out for themselves. I mean, let's have a little bit more depth than the thickness of a bumper sticker. Let's understand what's going on here. I wanted to address, again, we just got a jobs report. And I think what's indicative is that we saw the numbers were reflecting government-related associations. There was some relief, after SAG, that's a union deal. Of course, the auto workers union. But the jobs that are being created since COVID have been coming more out of the government than the private sector. Right. And you got a situation here that you reported earlier this year on John Kerry's office. I had no idea, employing 45 people. John Kerry, give me a break.
Right. Yeah. You can imagine their carbon footprint, right? That's a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Well, they're I don't know. They're getting their carbon credits at the same place, which they found out at COP28 was reported that they find out all these people that were in charge of qualifying all these carbon credits and everything like that. They were all phony, most of them.
Yeah, right. I mean, the whole carbon thing and the Kerry, it's a racket. It's phony. It's a lie. It's manipulation. It's horrific. The only thing crazier than that is San Francisco giving special bonuses, free money to Hispanic transgenders. They get $1,200 a month for 18 months. That's another crazy Judicial Watch story we uncovered. In fact, the acronym is GIFT. It's like, I forget the full acronym of the program, but they were paying out money to Latino and Black transgenders. They need special free money, and they get paid it every month, $1,200 for 18 months.
For 18 months. Wow.
There's another crazy but true story. Just like John Kerry, he wants to turn off all the coal-fired plants in the world. I mean, these people, they're out of their minds. They really are.
Well, it is amazing that what has happened to the world. And there are some countries that are figuring it out, and they're able to move a little bit faster. But we've got so much money invested and so much craziness invested in this country over, this, over this climate, doctrine and theology in a sense, because it is. That's basically what it boils down to. It's let's exchange your God for our God, right?
You are exactly right. It is a twisted theology of sorts where people have invented a pseudoscience that, it's their religion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Chris, we got to wrap things up. Again, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. Remind people, Judicial Watch, you do this on your own. I mean, donations, people are supporting and donating to the cause. How can they be on the team to support the great work of Judicial Watch?
The best thing to do to look at all of our work is to go to Judicial Watch, all together, one word, judicialwatch.org, O-R-G.
All right. Okay, well, check it out. Chris Farrell, thank you again. I appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on the show. You take care. Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you, Bill.
Chris Farrell, the Director of Investigations and Research for Judicial Watch. Just so appreciate his time and his intellect and what he brings to support the cause for the American people and our constitutional rights. Thank you so much to Chris. Thank you for being a part of the show and joining in and adding to the solution and not adding to the problem. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you his peace. Thank you so much for being with us. Take care. God bless.